Okay, good morning, everyone. As I mentioned last time, we are approaching the end of the semester. We are going to finish off today our second to last theme on collective robotics. How do we go about training groups of machines to do something that would be difficult or impossible for a single machine to do? We looked in lecture 21 at the evolution of teamwork, and more specifically, the evolution of specialization. But those virtual lions that we saw evolving on the virtual Serengeti plain, they were fundamentally limited in that they could not communicate with one another in order to coordinate their collective action. So we started last time in lecture 22 at looking at a different study, which is looking at coordinating groups of machines again. In this case, we're going to start with machines that do not communicate and set them a collective task, which is mating, finding one another in order to produce offspring, and to see whether the evolution of communication occurs. And again, we wouldn't be talking about this work if it didn't. When it does evolve, what does that communication look like? Okay, so just as a very quick reminder, we're going back in time again to, hopefully, maybe. There we go. We are going back to the early 90s, pre-physics engine era. We're looking at this toroidal grid world. So the male and female agents in the space move discretely from one cell to the next. But if they choose to move in a straight line, they can move forever, but they will eventually wrap around on this toroid. Yeah. We saw that the female and male agents have different capabilities and different limitations that are complementary. Females cannot hear, they cannot move, but they can sing. And we saw how they do so. Here's a female controller that takes as input position and orientation of whichever male is closest to her within her sensing radius. That propagates as binary values through a neural network to an output layer, which is then also rounded to binary values. And that binary vector is treated as that female's song. That song is broadcast to any males that are in her singing radius, which is the same as her sensing radius, represented by the bold boxes here. That song is input to the males, so males can hear, but they're blind. They cannot see females. They also cannot sing, but they are mobile. They can move. Yeah. Okay. We ended last time by talking about what happens as a male is moving about, and if that male happens to move into a cell occupied by a female, a mating event occurs. A copy of the male's neural network is created. A copy of the female's neural network is created. So we have a new male and a new female controller, the son and the daughter. Those two networks are taken out into the grid. Another male and female, another male and another female is found somewhere at random in the grid. That male and that female are deleted and replaced by the son and the daughter respectively. And then the mating pair is taken out of their shared cell and again placed at random positions on the grid. Yeah. When these neural networks are copied, we introduce a slight random mutation to the synaptic weights. So as we ended last time, we were observing that this is an evolutionary process. It is an evolutionary algorithm, but it looks very different from any evolutionary algorithm we've seen before. And despite the fact that this is quite an old study at this point, dating back to 91, this is kind of one of the more realistic evolutionary algorithms we're going to see. Yeah? Any questions about that before we start to look at this experiment in action? One other observation, just to repeat it from last time, there's no fitness function here, right? Or at least there's no explicit equation dictating who dies and who gets to produce offspring. Those that are allowed to produce offspring are those that produce offspring, those that find each other. Yeah? Okay, here we go. All right, so we're going to, as always, we're going to look at this evolutionary algorithm unfolding over time, but we're not going to look at traditional fitness curves like we have many times before. We're going to look at a series of tables that are reporting the proportions of males and females that are doing various things. Yeah. In this very first experiment, as you can imagine, when we wire up the 800 males with random controllers, they're going to move at random. And when we endow the 800 females with random controllers, they're going to sing randomly. They're going to generate random strings of binary values. In this particular experiment, we're going to set the number of output neurons in the female networks to 3. And because these are now binary vectors of length 3, this means that there are 8 different possible songs that any given female can sing at any given time. That also means that we're going to restrict the input layer of the male controllers to 3 so that they hear this 3-digit long song. So far, so good? Okay, so here are the 8 different songs. Over the first 100 time steps of this simulation, they're going to measure the proportion of males, or they're going to measure how the males respond when they happen to wander at random into the singing radius of a female, and how they respond to the sound of that song. Yeah? I mentioned 100 time steps here. So what is a time step? A time step allows all of the 800 females to sing their song. So the algorithm visits each of the 800 females, allows them to emit their song, and then we update the behavior of all the 800 males, whether or not they're hearing a song or not. Yeah, that's one time step. Then do it all again, second time step, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. Okay. As you would expect, if you look at each of these rows, on average, males they're either moving forward when they hear song 00, 25% of the time, turning right when they hear this song, 38% of the time, turn left 9% of the time, stand still 28% of the time. Same thing if males happen to hear the song 001. Makes sense, right? They're moving at random, they hear random songs, they react to those songs randomly. So it's kind of a sanity check. This is what you would expect at the beginning. I'm going to jump to the next slide and show you the next table. And for those that have slides printed out in front of you, or if you looked at the slide deck, don't cheat. What do you think is going to happen as time steps start to unroll in this simulation? How do you think the behavior of the males is going to change? We're not really looking at the behavior of the females here. We're just sort of plotting these 8 songs, which presumably, at least these taken together, these 800 females are singing during this period. We're looking at the behavior of the males. What do you think is going to start happening?
I don't think the males would change because the females are emitting songs at random, so there's no meaning to anything.
There's no meaning to these songs. They have no meaning yet, right? So maybe the behavior of the males isn't going to change.
They're going to stand still.
What's that?
They're going to stand still. They stand still, they don't reproduce.
Absolutely, right? All jokes aside, these males have only one thing on their minds, which is to mate, right? Worst thing you can possibly do, stay still, right? Okay. After 5,000 time steps, as predicted, none of the males are standing still. From time to time, but it's now quite rare, they will also turn right and turn left. Most of the time, they are moving forward. They just continue to move forward. So again, I hesitate to compare the males' behavior here to human males, but they're basically not listening and just going straight. Don't stay still, don't turn left, don't turn right, go straight, no matter what they hear. Why? Why did this behavior evolve? And this behavior did evolve. Remember that the males that find a female produce sons, and those sons have randomly modified copies of the controllers from their fathers, so they're going to tend to do similar things. So this process gets amplified.
Since they're not relying on signals, there's no like benefit to turning left or right because it's still just as random in that direction that you'll have a mate.
Okay.
So you would just, if you move forward, that's like your best option.
Absolutely. So if you stay still, you can be guaranteed at the next time step you're not going to mate because you're still in the same cell. Same thing goes for turning left and turning right. If you waste a time step turning left or turning right, you're guaranteed not to mate. But if you move forward, you have a non-zero chance of moving into a cell occupied by a female. Yep. Okay. Is this it? Are we done? Okay. As you can imagine, this experiment is going to continue. The time steps are going to continue to unroll. What changes might you expect to see next among the males and possibly the females? Is this the best that's possible in this particular environment? Again, we probably wouldn't be talking about this experiment if this was it. What do you expect to see happen next?
The songs develop meaning.
Okay, the songs develop meaning. We're just looking at behavior here. So what would it mean for songs to have meaning? How would we know that those songs have meaning? We're looking at the behavior of the males and also the females to some degree. What would these two groups be doing if the songs had meaning? Going towards each other. So you might see the rate at which reproductive events happens increases, which, yes, is about to happen, but why? What behavior facilitates that? You can imagine there's a certain rate at which reproductive events happen. If females are emitting songs at random, and males have evolved the ability to not listen to those songs, to not alter their behavior when they hear a change in song, to just always go forward. What change might you expect to see evolving in this virtual world so that the rate of reproductive events increases? That we would start to assume that the songs now have meaning.
You can see different probability distributions amongst the different songs.
Okay, different probability distributions among the songs. How so?
The songs aren't random anymore.
The songs aren't random anymore. And again, how would we see that?
Because for any one signal, most of the probability of what happens would be in one category or another.
Absolutely, right? So if you look across these rows here, the probability distributions are all the same. Most of the probability is sitting on move forward and very little on the other three categories. You would expect to see this clumping of probability, but this clumping would be different for different songs. Don't see that yet. The males are getting even better at ignoring the females. But if we keep going after 15,000 time steps, the story is now starting to change. And we are now seeing evidence that at least some of the songs have meaning. Which songs and what meaning do they have? And for whom?
Signifies turn right, and 110 signifies turn left.
Absolutely, right? So this is the evolution of communication. You could argue this is now also the evolution of language, and linguists distinguish between communication and language. There are subtle differences between them. For our purposes as roboticists, we will just conflate these two terms, communication and language, right? We have a language, and in this language that has 8 possible words, 2 of those words have evolved meaning. 101 means turn right, and 110 means turn left, and the other 6 mean maybe. Maybe the males are ignoring those other 6 songs. Maybe they mean go forward. But we know that before they didn't mean go forward, it was the males ignoring them. So we're a little less sure about what the other 6 words mean, but 101 and 110, pretty clear. Yeah? Is this it? Is this the best that the males and females can possibly do? Remember our description early on in the course about fitness landscapes. Are these 1,600 agents collectively sitting at the top of Mount Mansfield? Is this the highest possible fitness, which is represented by the rate at which they reproduce, which I'm not showing you? We're just looking at the behavior that presumably increases the rate of reproduction. Or are these 1,600 agents sitting on the top of Camel's Hump? This is a pretty good solution, but there are better solutions out there. What do you think? Most of the time, the males are going forward, but every once in a while, they stray into a female's territory, and if they hear 101, they turn right. Or if they hear 110, they turn left.
The only thing I can think of that would improve this with the songs is that if you had songs that meant different things depending on where you were relative to the female.
Ah, right. So what do these songs mean relative to the males, right? Or relative of the male relative to the female. Remember deictic sensing. The females are getting information at the input layer of their neural controller about where males are in their territory relative to them. For this female, she senses that this male is southwest of her. This female also senses, actually this female is sensing the closer male. Assume this male wasn't here, she would be sensing the relative position of the male that's closest to her, which would now be this one. She would sense this male being northwest. Yeah? These two females, if they're smart about it, they're in competition for a given male. Presumably, if they were smart about it, they would sing possibly different songs to this male, trying to attract him to her position. Yeah? Okay. The data that we've been looking at so far is not sufficient. It's hard to tell exactly what's going on here just by looking at these numbers. Yeah? Okay. So let's look a little bit closer about what's going on. Again, I apologize for the quality of these figures. This is from 1991. These two signals, these two songs, 101 and 110, if we looked at the females' behavior, they're very rarely singing these songs. They tend to sing these songs when the males hit these shaded bars, these shaded cells here. Why is that the right place for a male to hit to trigger that song?
Then it's just a straight route to the female without them having to, since they ignore so many other ones, that would be most direct, I guess.
The most direct. So if a male is moving straight, let's imagine a male enters this female's territory from the southwest down here, and that male is heading east, moving, moving, moving. That male ends up in this cell here. If the female can sing a song that causes the male to turn direction, she may be able to get the male to turn such that she's facing forward. And then, as you mentioned, her job is easy because she can go back to singing any of the other 6 songs with and she can be pretty confident that this male is going to do what males tend to do at this point in evolutionary time in this virtual world, which is go straight. Yeah? So far, so good? Okay. If a male does enter from the southwest heading east, which of the 2 songs should she sing?
One,
110. That'll do it. That'll cause the male to turn left. But the female could sing 101, which would cause the male to turn right. But that means now the male is facing away from her. What should the female do in that case? Remember, she can sense not just the relative position of the male, but the heading of the male. The male is now south of her, facing south. Either one could be back to left, back to right. Keep singing the turn direction song until the male is facing north, and then sing any of the either ignore me or go forward songs. Yeah? As mentioned here, at this point in evolutionary time, the females were not necessarily singing either of the two turn songs for all 8 of these shaded regions. Some of the females would sing those songs for some subset of these 8 cells. As evolution proceeded during this era, around time step 15,000, the females were evolving to sing the turning song for more and more of these 8 shaded cells. They're evolving the ability to catch males across a wider, they're basically widening the net with which they can convince males to approach. Yeah? Is that it? Are there other potential strategies here for the males and females? Is this the top of Mount Mansfield? Assume all the 800 females sing the turning song for all 8 of these shaded regions.
Well, the problem with this is that the females are also competing with each other. So you have like overlapping areas, and you're waiting until the gray area, then you're missing out on areas that you could persuade a male to get over to your area, not in the other one.
Absolutely, right? So it's a little difficult to see here. This is this particular female's singing radius. Another female may have her singing radius overlapping this cell, for example, and she might have this as a shaded cell for her, meaning how a male enters that particular cell, she knows what song to sing for the male to respond to her in the way she would want the male to respond, right? Females can be in competition. So as you pointed out, there is further potential here. Yeah. Okay. We're going to pause for a moment and actually look at some data over evolutionary time. So here's a fitness curve that we've seen before. On the horizontal axis, we have evolutionary time. It's no longer number of generations of populations of controllers, because we don't really have that anymore. It's just time steps here, right? We were just talking about the state of play at 15,000 time steps. And again, I apologize, it's very difficult to see in this figure here. It says test here, the test that they performed, and then they performed a control experiment. And we talked about control experiments last time. They're going to knock out or suppress one of the details of their experiment and run that experiment again and see whether that knocked out part of the experiment causes the males and females to evolve slower or not evolve communication. That would provide evidence that in the test case, where that particular detail is not knocked out, is facilitating the evolution of communication. Okay, so let's look at the test first. Let's see here. That is, I forget, it's very difficult to see in this figure. Okay. The test are little squares. Here are the little squares here. And the control experiment are little circles. Well, it's a little difficult to see. Here are the little circles here. So here's the test case here. We're plotting on the vertical axis here moves. What do you think this means? It's kind of vague. What moves? The average number of moves that a male takes until it participates in a reproductive event. As you can see in both the test case and the control case, these numbers are going down, and later in evolutionary time, males are reproducing on average less than 50%, takes them less than 50 moves on average in order to reproduce. Yeah. In the control case here, males evolve to reproduce faster over evolutionary time, but never reach the ability of males in the test case. So what's going on in the control case? In the control case, we're going to deafen the males, so they cannot hear female songs at all. No evolution of communication is possible in the control case. As you would expect, in this control case with deafened males, they don't do as well. What do you think the deafened males are doing in the control experiment? Going straight, right? If you can't hear, that's your best bet in this situation to participate in reproductive events. Okay. If we look early on in evolution, you see something that's kind of strange, which is the control males are actually reproducing faster than the males in the test case. The deafened males are evolving to reproduce faster than the non-deafened males. Why is that?
Probably because the signals are just like extra noise that's just like compounding like the things that they could do.
Absolutely. So the evolution of communication, obviously once communication gets going, is extremely useful, right? We're communicating right now. Clearly it's useful, right? It's very, very difficult for evolution to evolve. We've already mentioned this now. The deaf males always move forward. The listening males can be confused by female songs. They can change their behavior. They can stop moving forward, which for the males is usually not a good thing to do. It's expensive. Yeah? They're wasting time steps, not reproducing. Yeah? So why is the evolution of communication so difficult? There's two reasons. First one is the challenge for the listener, right? The listener has to reliably do the right thing when the listener hears that piece of communication. Things are also difficult for the signaler, the person or the machine that is emitting the language, because they need to know what to say, or in this case, what to sing, under the right conditions. Right? Going back to here. Females need to emit the turn song under the right conditions. A female can actually emit a turn song that causes a male to turn away from her and then leave her singing radius. So during this period here, things are a little dicey for the males and the females. Yeah, there has to be a series of mutation events during random reproductive events that lead to sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters and so on and so forth, where two things have to happen together. The female has to reliably emit songs under certain conditions, and there have to also be males that reliably do the right thing under those conditions. You've got to get both things right simultaneously. Yeah? Tricky. But in this simplified environment, it's possible. It happens. Or at least it happened in this particular evolutionary trial. So far, so good? Okay, let's keep going. Here's an example of a mating event, an actual mating event. We have a female down here, and I apologize for the size of the font here. The female at this point in time is emitting the song 0, 0, 0. A male is sitting down here to her southwest. The male is facing north. At the next time step, the male moves forward and enters the female's territory, and she changes her song from 0, 0, 0 to 1, 0, 1. This is the only male in her territory, so it's clear from this picture that she saw this male, and her perception of this male caused her to change her song. The male, when he heard that song, continued to move forward, is now immediately to her west, and now that he's immediately to her west, she has changed her song from 101 to 011. That causes the male to turn right, and she switches back to the song 101, which in the next panel, which is not shown here, causes the male to go forward. Reproductive event occurs. Yeah? Okay. Here's another example of a better evolved female signal male response pairing. We've got a male now northwest heading east. Similar sort of things happens. She changes her song. The male continues to move forward. She gets to 101, and now the male, instead of turning right, turns left. Not such a good thing. Why is this a better combination of signaling and response? This paired behavior is actually going to lead to a reproductive event. Why? The male has actually not done such a great thing here. He has responded inappropriately to the signal. How does the female respond to this turning and facing north now?
Tell them to turn again.
So there may be different males at this point of view, at this point in time. It's not clear. Some males might enter and do exactly this, and when those males hear 101, they turn right. This male doesn't. This male turns left, but it seems that this female has evolved a signaling strategy to handle that different type of male. So it's a better strategy from the female's point of view. She has not necessarily widened her net over the larger area from which she can capture males. She is now able to change her behavior to influence the behavior of different kinds of males. Make sense? Okay. All right. So to continue this, she keeps singing what to this male means turn left, and what to another male might mean turn right, until he's facing her, and then she sings the go forward song, or at least the go forward song for this male. Yeah? Okay. At this point, they continue to run this evolutionary trial, and this is about as good as things got. You can see there's diminishing returns here. It's basically the females evolving to capture males over a wider range of their singing radii, and their ability to capture males that are responding differently to the same kinds of songs. Yeah? Okay. That was the first experiment in the series. We're going to look at a second and final experiment, very similar to what we just saw, but they're going to make one change. They're going to restrict the number of songs that the females can sing to 4 different songs. They're going to constrict the output layer of the female neural controllers to now just 2 output neurons. So the females can sing 00, 01, 10, or 11. Same thing with the male's input layer. There's now 2 input neurons for the male's neural controller. The males can only hear these 4 songs, and we're going to leave everything else the same. The males can still do 1 of 4 possible motor primitives at every time step. Yeah? By restricting the number of possible songs, they've restricted the total possible combination of songs and what males can do in response to a smaller number, that they can actually report all of those potential responses in a single table. Yeah? So let's talk about this single table. First of all, we're now starting the second experiment. So we've gone back to the beginning. We're now at time step 0. We have 1,600 random controllers distributed across the 800 males and 800 females. Every entry in this table here corresponds to what males could do in those situations. So you'll notice that each cell has 1 integer to the left of the colon and 4 integers to the right of the colon. Yeah? Let's look at the 4 integers to the right of the colon. There's 4 places here. These 4 places correspond to these 4 different songs. So the first digit to the right of the colon is what males do when they hear 00. The second cell, what males do when they hear 01, what males do when they hear 10, and what the males do when they hear 11. So far, so good? So sticking with this cell up here, the digits are 0, 0, 0, 1, which means if males hear 00, they stay still. In the second song, in the second setting here, if males hear 01, they go forward. If they hear the third song, which is 10, they turn left. And if they hear 11, the fourth song, the fourth position here, they go forward. So you'll notice if you now scan down this entire table, you can see down here in the bottom right, 3, 3, 3, 3. What does that mean? What does 3, 3, 3 mean? Turn right.
For any signal.
for any signal. So males that are captured or placed in this cell in the table, those males are always turning right, regardless of which of the 4 songs they hear. Yeah? Males up here in the upper left, I think this is a typo. There should be 4 zeros here. Males up here will always stay still regardless of the song they hear. Males in the upper right, males that are placed in the upper right cell of this table, 0013, they stay still according to the first song. They stay still if they hear the second song. 1, they go forward if they hear the third song. 3, in the 4th position, they turn right if they hear the 4th song. Yeah? So every cell in this table represents a different male behavior. Make sense? What do you think the digit to the left of the colon represents at this particular point in time?
How many males exhibit that behavior?
How many males exhibit that behavior? So at time 0, out of the 800 males, 4 of them would stay still regardless of what song they heard. 12 in this cell down here, there were 12 males that would stay still, turn left, stay still, according to those 4 songs. Okay. As you would expect, random male neural controllers, random female controllers. If you scan your eye down all the integers to the left of the colons here, it's more or less a uniform distribution, as you would expect. Yeah? So far, so good? Okay, so let's start marching forward in evolutionary time again. This is now at time step 8,000. At this point, we all have males clumping up in one particular cell here. There are 547 out of the 800 males that, whose response 1311 means when they hear song 1, go forward. When they hear song 2, turn right. When they hear song 3, go forward. When they hear song 4, go forward. So we have, again, the evolution of communication here. An additional observation, among these 547 males, they were seen to, at this point in time, they were observed to respond to females that were only actually emitting signals 1 and 2. These males never actually heard the 3rd and 4th song. If they did, they would go forward. Most of the other kinds of males that have different kinds of strategies have died out at this point. There are still some smaller pockets of males elsewhere in this table. Why this additional detail here? Seems like kind of an arbitrary observation. Why does this matter? Any ideas?
I'm sorry, what additional detail are you talking about?
So this additional detail over here, so we've got a whole bunch of males that go forward when they hear song 1, and they turn right when they hear song 2. There's 547 of them, so they're covering a lot of territory in this virtual world. They're straying in and out of a lot of female territories. In all those cases, the females, when they detected those males, didn't use their full vocal range. Females can sing 4 different songs, but in this case, they only ever use the first 2. They never use the 3rd and 4th song. Kind of curious.
Well, they don't need to use 3 and 4 because only 1 and 2 actually well, 2 they need to use because that's the one that turns them right. But
Yep.
1 does the same thing as 3 and 4, so it doesn't really matter if they use it.
Okay, so females they don't need to use songs 1 and 2 for this group of males because this group of males presumably is doing the right thing for those 2 songs. Yeah? Put yourself in the shoes of the females now. There's an opportunity here, or there's a lost opportunity at this point. What is it?
respond to the other two songs?
There are other groups of males out here. Look at these groups of males up here. You'll notice that just to the right of the colon, in most of these cases, is 1-1. What happens when those males enter these females' environments? What do those males do? They go straight through, right? Now, if they're on the center row or the center column, they might reproduce with those females, but it's a lost opportunity. These females at this point, although they're not drawn in this table, are failing to capture these males. Yeah? What do you think is going to happen as we start to move forward again in evolutionary time beyond time step 8,000?
The ones that respond, the one we were talking about, are just going to die out.
These might die out because these males are not able to respond appropriately. Let's go. Here's 10,000. You'll notice that this number is getting a little bit bigger. This number is getting smaller. There's another big group out here. I also noticed that these numbers sum to something more than 800, which doesn't make sense to me. Okay, anyways, it's the relative numbers that matter here. You'll notice that this group out here actually is growing. There were 64 males, now there's 127 males. These males' behavior can be encoded as 1113. These males are tending to respond to females that a separate set of females that are only emitting songs 3 and 4. What can you conclude about the state of play at this point in time, in this evolutionary era? What's happening here?
There's like a specific group of male and females that evolve to have like a different behavior that doesn't work for like most, but like works really well for a few.
There's two groups. The two groups of males and there's one group of male and female, and another group of males and females that have evolved different languages. Yeah? They mean different things to different groups. Okay, that's kind of interesting. We have one world that has no physical obstacles. There's no mountains, there's no oceans, there's nothing separating these groups. In this co-mixed group, the evolution of multiple languages. Kind of interesting. Yeah? Okay. The fact that now in this world there exists more than one language means there is now an additional opportunity here. What is that additional opportunity? These males and females are doing pretty well. These males and females are doing pretty well. What's the opportunity here?
To produce an offspring that understands both.
Right? We've got two groups of monolinguists here, males and females that can speak and understand one language. Where are the bilinguals in this grid? It's hard to tell from this picture. Let's start moving forward. At 12,000 time steps, there are now 128 males in the 1313 category. Males that go straight and turn according to songs 1 and 2, and also go straight and turn according to songs 3 and 4. This is only telling us about the males. It's not saying anything about whether there are bilingual females yet. But these males are bilingual. If we went in and actually looked at the behavior of these males, they're responding correctly to both female groups. They are able to listen to and respond appropriately to the females that sing songs 1 and 2. And also, if they stray into the territory of females that only sing 3 and 4, they also respond appropriately. What do you think is going to start happening as we now continue to move forward in evolutionary time? We've sort of got three groups now, the two monolinguist groups and the one bilingual group. Ideas?
The bilingual group would become dominant.
Here's the state of play at 14,000, 470 and 286 monolinguists, 217 bilingual speakers and listeners, bilingual listeners. This doesn't say anything about the females. 16,000 time steps. These numbers have started to decrease. This number's also decreased a little bit. 20,000 time steps. These numbers have decreased even more. This has started to grow. 30,000 time steps. One of the monolinguist groups of males and females has gone extinct. The other one is about to. There's only one left. 40,000 time steps. Yeah. How many of you only speak one language? Okay, me too. Bit of an object lesson here for us, right? Okay. So that concludes our discussion of the evolution of communication. We saw evolution evolving multiple times in these simplified environments. We saw some interesting things, not just the evolution of a single mode of communication or a single language, multiple languages, and a competitive advantage to listeners and speakers to be able to speak multiple languages. Kind of interesting. Okay. Any questions about that or anything else we've covered in collective robotics before we move on? Okay, so we have half an hour left. We will start in on lecture 24, which is the first of 4 lectures we're going to look at, where we're going to broaden the evolutionary algorithm and allow it to optimize the physical structure and the neural controllers of our robots. You'll notice we're jumping from lecture 22 to 24. I don't think we're going to have time for lecture 23 on self-replication. I forgot to put a link there. When I get back to my office, I'll link in lecture 23 for those that are interested in this particular topic. Okay, here we go. We're going to look at the very first attempt to evolve bodies and brains that was reported back in 1994. So again, we're going quite a bit back into the past, to the beginning of the field of evolutionary robotics. At the beginning of the course, we talked about 2 experiments that kind of launched evolutionary robotics, with the little Kepra hockey puck robot and that crazy gantry robot that was driving around on rails. This is the 3rd experiment that also helped to kick off evolutionary robotics, which, as you can see, and I'll play this video in a moment, uses a physics engine. But as I've mentioned several times in this course so far, physics engines weren't invented until 2000. Carl Sims, who is a computer graphics researcher and an extremely talented coder, wrote his own physics engine. It was only in 2000 that this became actually a commercial enterprise. So 6 years before people were sort of generally aware of this technology, Carl had written his own physics engine because he wanted to try to use these things called evolutionary algorithms, which had existed since the 70s, to try and evolve virtual creatures. Yeah? Okay, I'm going to play this video for you, and there's audio for this video, but I will just narrate for us. Here we go. We're going to jump right in and look at the products of an evolutionary algorithm. Carl not only created a physics engine, but he also added hydrodynamics. So he's simulating things that are moving through a fluid. Not bad for 1994, right? Some of you have probably seen versions of this in your own evolving code, yeah? So obviously we're looking at various results from the evolution of locomotion. where, as you can already see, the evolutionary algorithm is changing not just the neural controller inside this robot, but also the body plan, the positions and sizes and orientations of the links that make up the agent. We're going to see in a moment, we're going to go from the evolution of locomotion to the evolution of jumping in a moment. Here's jumping. Oh, sorry. We're now going to go from the evolution of jumping to phototaxis, which is moving towards a light source. In this case, this is after evolution. So at this point, Carl has evolved creatures to minimize the distance between themselves and a target point in their environment that they can sense. And then after evolution, he's going to take the evolved creature with the highest fitness, play it back, and with his mouse, he's going to move around this target position that the creatures can see. In this next set of experiments, if I can go back, in this last set of experiments, we'll come back and talk about the technical details of this work. We're going to see the evolution of competition now. We just looked at the evolution of teamwork. We looked at the evolution of teamwork. We looked at the evolution of communication. Now let's have a look at the evolution of competition. Now we're going to simulate pairs of agents, place an object between them. What's the fitness function selecting for, do you think? Given pairs of creatures that have evolved against this fitness function. Any guesses?
Probably just the first to touch it.
The first to touch it, maybe. Other ideas? Who touches it for the longest? Maybe. Other ideas?
Incentivizes touching it if something else isn't touching it.
Maybe incentivize it to touch it if something else isn't touching it. Let's keep going. We're looking at increasingly fit individuals. Can I back up? Does that change your idea about what the fitness function is? Sorry. Where did we get to? What's the fitness function?
We minimize how long the other robot is touching it.
Minimize how much it's touching it, and
Because it just doesn't seem to be, in that clip you just showed, it doesn't seem to be interested in how long it is making contact with it. It cares more that the other robot isn't.
possibly. Let's keep going. This is now the best solution. What's the fitness function?
Near to the block.
Near to the block and maximize the distance of the other from the block. Pretty aggressive strategy. Pretty good counter solution to that strategy. Allow the other to help you win. Okay. There's a lot going on in this video. I highly recommend going back and watching some of these strategies and thinking about them. We've spent most of the time in this course talking about evolution of behavior. In this last part of the video, we were looking at a particular aspect or type of evolution, which is coevolution. Species in nature and species of robots in this experiment are not evolving in a vacuum. They are not evolving to do better and better in their environment. They are evolving against other populations that are competing for similar resources. And so now this metaphor of a fitness landscape as a set of mountains no longer makes sense. I want you to think about two separate populations evolving on fitness landscapes. And if one population finds a peak in their respective fitness landscape, like in the case of the competing blocks here, one group gets better at pulling the block towards themselves and or pushing members of the second population away from the block. What is happening to the fitness landscape for the second population?
Ceilings got higher. Right?
The ceiling got higher, maybe? Is there another metaphor we can use here? You've got two groups at a given point in time that are sitting on local peaks. They're both pretty good, and suddenly there's a mutation in one group, an evolutionary change that causes members of the first group to do much better, which means they've moved up somehow in their fitness landscape. What happens to the individuals in the other population? They move down. They're sitting on some ground which is suddenly falling underneath their feet. Yeah? So when we start to think about coevolution, it's better to switch the fitness landscape metaphor from mountains to the ocean. Yeah? Now you've got waves. You're in a boat. You're trying to move up a wave to the peak of that wave, but the waves themselves are moving. Parts of the fitness landscape are going up or down depending on what's happening in the other fitness landscape. Yeah? As you saw in that video, that leads to a lot of diversity of solutions. You cannot afford to sit still in terms of evolution. You have to continuously innovate in order to stay competitive with other populations which are also evolving and changing to become more competitive. Yeah? Coevolution in robots and in nature tends to drive diversity and innovation. Yeah? Okay, so how did Carl manage this trick in 1994? This was, again, one of these experiments that sort of blew people away. Carl was hired by a company, Thinking Machines Corporation, that had developed this brand new supercomputer at the time in the early 90s called the Connection Machine 5. Here's a picture of it down here. It was very popular at the time. If you go back and watch Jurassic Park, there's a Connection Machine 5 standing in here in the laboratory. This was, at the time, the state of the art. In this Connection Machine 5, there were over 1,000 CPU cores. These were all parallel cores, and each core was connected to five other nodes, 5 other cores, and communicating with those cores. So it was a highly parallel machine. At the time, it had a peak speed of 131 billion floating point operations per second. Pretty good. My Mac Pro that's running in my office over there right now has slightly less. Yeah. So basically, sort of the state of the art in the moment in terms of a desktop sitting in a whole bunch of big machines. Pretty powerful. This company at the time was trying to sell these machines and trying to convince potential buyers that this is a useful machine. Back in the early 90s, people had a hard time understanding why you would need that much computational power, and specifically why parallel computation might be a useful thing. So Thinking Machines Corporation hired this computer graphics researcher to basically create a demo, which we just saw, to create a demo that would demonstrate what's possible, and in addition, for the technically inclined, why that was possible because of the parallelism in the machine. How does the evolutionary robotics experiment that we just saw exploit parallelism? Some of you might have already started to figure out how to do this on your own machine that has multiple parallel processes.
It's doing like kind of like what we did with the like different like parallel hill climber, where you're just like running the different populations and members out at the same time.
Absolutely. So in all the experiments you just saw, the population size was 1,024. Yeah. So Carl was running 1,000 simulations in parallel on the Connection Machine 5 back in the early 90s. This was definitely rocket science at that time. Yeah. Oh, sorry, the population size was 300. I misspoke. He was often running multiple populations as well in this situation. And some of the cores he was using for the evolutionary algorithm to coordinate the farming out and collecting fitness values back from the different simulations. Most of the runs you just saw would run for 100 generations, and that took about 3 hours on the CM5 at that time. Maybe not that different from what some of you are starting to be able to achieve on your own laptops and desktops. Okay. Let's go further under the hood and look at how Carl altered an evolutionary algorithm to allow it to change both body and brain. In Carl's approach here, we're going to encode genotypes as graphs, which you see over here. In this course now, we've seen evolutionary algorithms in which the genotypes are strings of numbers or vectors, like in your code base. Last time when we saw the evolution of the virtual lions, we saw genotypes as trees. Now we're looking at an evolutionary algorithm that is creating initially a population of random graphs and then translating those graphs into phenotypes, where phenotypes are going to be, as always, simulated robots with different morphologies and controllers. Yeah? Okay, we're going to, I think we've got enough time to talk about the genotypes here, which as you can see are graphs. Just as a reminder, graphs are collections of nodes connected by edges. Not that different from your simulated robots, which are links connected together by joints. Yeah? These, he used a particular type of graphs, which are nested, directed multigraphs. And I will unpack each of these adjectives. A directed graph is one in which the edges that connect pairs of nodes together are directed. That's pretty straightforward. We'll come back to the nested part of the graphs in a few slides. What is a multigraph? For those of you that have seen graphs which are nodes and edges before, a multigraph allows multiple edges to leave one node and arrive at the same other node. So in this case, we've got two nodes and we have two edges leaving, the same two edges arriving at another node, multiple edges connecting the same pair of nodes. We're going to see in a moment, as we translate these graph genotypes into phenotypes, that this mapping process is itself recursive. It's recursive in the sense that it's going to allow recursive structures, structures within structures within structures, like you can see in the case of the tree here. So far, so good? Okay. All right, let's start to go a little bit deeper. For any one genotype, that genotype can be made up of one or more nodes. Here's one genotype with one node and two edges. Every node is going to have associated with it a series of labels and these labels are descriptions or instructions about how to turn that node into a link in the simulator. Edges also are going to have a number of labels associated with them, which are going to tell us not how to encode a joint, but how to change as we travel along that edge, how to change the link we're going to create when we arrive at the target node. Yeah? Okay. Let's go back to the nodes for a moment. Some of the labels are a little bit more intuitive than others. One of the labels inside a node represent length, width, and height of that link. So let's imagine we want to turn this genotype into this phenotype. We start at some node in the genotype. We start here. Inside that node, there are three numbers, length, width, and height, which allow us to create this link with this particular node length and height. Yeah? Okay. We then we've created this link. We now leave this node and we travel along one of the two edges. Doesn't really matter which one. We're going to come back and visit the other edge. Let's imagine that we travel out along this left-hand outgoing edge. This edge also has some labels associated with it that tell us how to change the position and orientation and scale of the link we just created. So we leave this edge holding on to the length, width, and height of the link we just created. And it tells us how to change that length, width, and height. We're also going to take with us the position at which we placed that link. So we're taking length, width, and height and X, Y, and Z along with us. We're going to take a 7th, 8th, and 9th number along with us, which is orientation, the yaw, pitch, and roll of that link. As we travel along that link, these 9 numbers are going to tell us how to change the original 9 numbers so that when we finish traveling along this edge and we come back here, we now have a changed set of 9 numbers that allow us to create this link here. So far, so good? Okay. We've now just created this second link. There are some additional labels inside this node that tell us how to connect that newly created link back to the link that we just created, which was this one. Yeah? When we were first visiting this node, there was also information about joints, but this is the root link, and the root link doesn't really have a joint, right? It's only when we create non-root links that we want to connect them with joints back to the links that we just created. So far, so good? Okay, so you can imagine we start here, we go along this self-connection, it gives us deltas, we create this link, we're back here. Let's imagine we follow this link again, which again tells us how to change position, orientation, and scale, which causes us to create this link. We go out along the left edge again, come back to the same link, create this one, go along this link, the left link again, create this one. We are doing this recursively, which means we're in danger of continuing to do this forever. Yeah? We can't create a robot, at least yet, that has infinite numbers of links that make it up. So we need to put some additional information somewhere in the genotype to tell this mapping, this algorithm that we're describing that's mapping this genotype into this phenotype. We need to tell it when to stop. Yeah? How do we do that? There is an additional label or piece of information inside every node called the recursive limit. This is an integer. Every time we visit a node, when we're leaving that node, we reach back and decrease the recursive limit by 1. just before we leave. Yeah? So here, it's a certain integer. We decrease it by 1. We come back to that same node, do what we need to do, decrease that label by another 1, keep going. And in this cartoon example, after the mapping had just created this link, RL was now at 0, and that 0 means stop. You're not allowed to go out along any more outgoing edges. Imagine you can hopefully now get more or less a sense of how this genotype is mapped into this phenotype. We've only talked about the body so far. We haven't mentioned the neural controller yet. We'll get to that. All of the numbers inside of all these nodes and the numbers inside all of these edges, they're all targets for mutation. So assume that whatever the fitness function is, this particular creature manages to survive and produce an offspring. We do that in the way we've always done it. We take the genotype of this particular robot, make a copy of that genotype, and when we do, we mutate the genotype in some way. Imagine that a mutation hit this particular node at random, and then inside that node, that mutation hits the recursive limit at random and randomly increases the integer in here by 1. If we now take that child genotype and map it back onto a phenotype, we construct the phenotype from that mutated genotype, what do you think that phenotype is going to look like? We've increased the recursive limit by 1. How is the child going to look different from its parent?
It'll have another recursive set.
It's going to have another recursive link. It's going to have an additional periphery of twigs on its edges. Yeah? A mutation that decreased the recursive limit would sort of trim this tree. A mutation that hits length, width, and height is going to make a taller or a wider tree. Yeah? Okay. I think the remaining details, we'll save this for next time. Let's pause here for today. You have a quiz due tonight. You're continuing to work on your final project. Have a good rest of your week.